once again now is Nina Turner, who I'm sure almost all of you know, if not all of you. Nina is president of Our Revolution. She is a former state senator from the great state of Ohio and a national leader of the progressive movement. So, Nina, thanks for joining us.
Great to join you, RJ.
Listen, there are so many things we could talk about, but let's start with this. Some progressives had some races this week. You guys were backing those progressives. Who were they and how did they do?
Yes, we were backing several progressives in last Tuesday's race, or just this week, actually, October the 3rd. But Randall Woodfin is now mayor-elect in Birmingham, Alabama, which is tremendous because we know that, in the conservative South, many people don't believe that progressives can win, but they can if we invest the time and the energy. And he ran such a stellar campaign. He ran a campaign on we deserve better, we can have better. And I want to be the kind of elected official, the kind of mayor that gets you that across the spectrum. And he won overwhelmingly. He won his primary, but as you know, in politics, is winning the general. But he won his general by 20 points. And Our Revolution played a very huge role in that, as well as Senator Sanders. And we're just really proud of that, to have young African Americans like Randall Woodfin run as progressives. The same thing happened with Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi. So we see a pattern happening here, that you can run progressive, you can be unapologetic about it, motivate people from their heart, and get them to come out to vote. And RJ, he won across the spectrum too, in terms of class, age. It wasn't just millennials versus the senior, more seasoned people, or vice versa. He won across the spectrum in Birmingham, Alabama.
And this is a good sign for upcoming races too, isn't it? For example, Fort in Atlanta comes to mind.
Yes, absolutely. That would be our triple. That would be our third one in the South. But we are very much in support of Senator Fort. As you know, Senator Sanders was just with him in Atlanta last week. And I hope to go out there and help him too. But Our Revolution is really on the job in terms of his race as well. And then we had Tim Keller in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he won his primary race. So we're really out there. We're putting in the sweat equity that is necessary to help our candidates win. And I do want to reinforce for your listeners that we do understand that Our Revolution, that is not just about the shiny object that is the presidency or the Congress, but in order to build a progressive nation, every single office matters. School board members, mayors, city council, they all matter.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the strategy is reinforcing a genuinely progressive movement at all levels. And a lot of people are saying, for example, just as one example, that cities, our cities, particularly with the Republicans right now having a stranglehold on the federal government, our cities are and can be engines of progressive change. So if we put real progressives in the mayoralties, in the city councils, and so on, we can start to show the nation and in the world how well progressive policies work when they're implemented at that level. I assume you agree with that, but let me know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, okay, and then also, of course, our mayors, our city council members, our state representatives, legislators, that's the field from which the future governors and senators and perhaps presidents will come. So all of that is very good work, and we know we have our work cut out for us because we've had a lot going on this week with the horrific shooting in Las Vegas, the aftermath of the disaster in Puerto Rico. Any thoughts on those or any other current events before we go to our next topic?
Yeah, we do have our work cut out for us. So, certainly condolences, thoughts, and prayers to everybody that has been directly impacted by all of the natural disasters that have been happening, in this country and really throughout the world. And the fact that Americans, we are very generous. That I will say, when we have natural disasters like that, we really step up together and really help our sisters and brothers who are struggling. My attention, in particular right now is about Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And, we have a group of nurses, for example, National Nurses United are sending teams of nurses into Puerto Rico to help our sisters and brothers. And there are other professional groups that are going in to use their expertise. So we got to keep doing that. Unfortunately, our president, again, being so as self-absorbed as he always is, got into an entanglement, a battle back and forth with the mayor of San Juan, which is unfortunate, and making allegations about just in general the people of Puerto Rico not wanting to help themselves. And so we got to do what this president is unable to do or either unwilling to do, which is to come together in moments like this, like we always do, but even stronger than before, and have a great deal of empathy on people who are actually in those moments. Raw sewage is real. Not having electricity for months is real. Not knowing where you're going to get your next meal from or trying to find your family member. All of those things are real. So I'm just really asking people, and this is not about a political affiliation at all. This is about being affiliated with humanity, that our sisters and brothers in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, they really need us.
One of the things that's really struck me about the president's response to the Puerto Rico disaster, I mean, other than on the lighthearted side, you called him self-absorbed and he was throwing paper towels, which somehow seems to kind of fit. But on a very serious note, what strikes me about this president is, you've got the people who are victimized in Florida by natural disaster, people victimized in Texas by natural disaster, people victimized much worse in Puerto Rico by natural disaster, and yet he doesn't treat that third group the same way he treats the first two groups. He doesn't talk about them the same way. He doesn't show them the same respect. He blames truck drivers. He blames the mayor of the capital city. I really think this has something to do with the ethnicity of the people involved. Do you think I'm being unfair?
No, I don't. And I didn't want to think that way. I didn't want that to be the issue. But you're absolutely right. He did not deal with the crises that struck our sisters and brothers on the mainland in the same way that he dealt with our sisters and brothers in Puerto Rico. And it really doesn't make sense. But if you are not self-aware, if you don't have, it just seems to me that he just does not have the capacity to empathize and also the capacity to be well behaved. Because that's what this comes down to. I certainly can't judge his heart, but his actions have shown that he absolutely did treat the folks in Puerto Rico differently than he treated our sisters and brothers. Well, they're all our sisters and brothers, but differently than he treated the people in Texas and also in Florida. And it just doesn't make any sense. And then to get into a fight, RJ, with the mayor of San Juan, who is only trying to advocate for her people. That's what she's elected to do. It just doesn't, he doesn't know. He needs to listen to Kenny Rogers' song, one of my favorite Kenny Rogers songs, when he says, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to run. This president doesn't know how to do any of that. And sometimes it's just best to keep quiet, but send the forces out to help people, all people. It doesn't, when we're in disaster, ethnicity and all that other stuff doesn't matter. People need our help. And so, stunningly ashamed. The president just never ceases to amaze me in a very negative way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I also think that one of the things that's come out of the reporting on the disaster in Puerto Rico is that the people of Puerto Rico have been under, kind of austerity economics regimen for quite a while. Very strict terms in terms of even their ability to govern themselves without giving priority to creditors, many of whom bought up Puerto Rico's debt in order to speculate on it. And so we're finding that the people of Puerto Rico already weren't able to meet their needs because of the servicing these creditors, these Wall Street financiers who have political connections. And it seems to me that that's a reflection of the fact that the people in Puerto Rico, like other cities that are in that, or areas of the country that are in that jam, and I'm thinking of, for example, Detroit and so on, that our people on the mainland and in Puerto Rico, a lot of them don't have the political voice they need in order to be independent of financial exploitation. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I do agree with that. And, I was on a show just even yesterday, and one of the callers brought up, and you don't want to think this way, but you're going to understand when I say, when she just asked the question, she was just wondering out loud about whether or not, some big companies and wealthy people will be able to profit from disaster. And that's just kind of heavy to think about, but we know that that can happen. It might happen. And what is our obligation to make sure that people don't profit off of other folks' misery, and that Puerto Rico is not overtaken in that way, where some folks are going to make money hand over fist. Meanwhile, the citizens there continue to struggle. And you hit the nail on the head, RJ, and the austerity problems in Puerto Rico, the infrastructure challenges. And this president brought that up too. Again, not knowing that is not an issue to talk about when folks have just been hit by a natural disaster, even if you feel that way. My message to him is that in a civilized society, we don't say everything that we think. Because just think about it. If all of us just walked around and said everything that we think, we wouldn't be able to have a calm conversation. We probably wouldn't even like most people if we said everything that we think. So his judgment is off most of the time. And he never ceases to amaze me.
Well, stick around. I'm sure he'll keep doing it. Before I let you go, and again, we're talking with Nina Turner, president of Our Revolution. There's something that's been on my mind, and I wanted to talk it over with you, especially in light of the victory in Birmingham, Alabama, and elsewhere, where we're seeing progressive African American leaders come to the fore and win. I hope we're going to have another such win in Atlanta shortly. I still hear people mostly inside the Democratic Party establishment, telling me, and everyone, not me in particular, but basically arguing that there is somehow, first of all, that real progressives they're bros, they're white, they're male, and that you have to somehow make a decision, a choice between social justice politics, what some people call identity politics, and economic justice politics. And Nina Turner, I wanted your thoughts on it because I just don't get it. I don't think Dr. King thought that way when he talked about when you integrate a lunch counter, you also have to be able to afford the hamburger. And so I don't know of very many leaders for human rights who didn't also understand the need for economic rights. Do you agree that this is a distraction and that there is no separation? And if so, why do you think people keep bringing it up?
To tear people apart, and even sometimes folks that are supposed to be on the good side can try to sow discord as well for their own political gain. Now, while it is absolutely true that there is structural racism in this country, a book I want to recommend for your listeners is The Color of Law, where the author really goes deep into the history of this country, that it wasn't just one prejudiced or one racist person against African Americans. It was really a system, a government-led, controlled system that led to discrimination and disparate treatment within the housing industry, for example. So it's called The Color Law. So that's just one example. Structural, institutional racism does exist. We can talk about that as a society, deal with that as a society, and also acknowledge the connection that other poor folks, other working class folks, and middle class folks, what we have in common. It would be what Reverend Jesse Jackson would call the Rainbow Coalition. It would be what you just mentioned in terms of Dr. King, because I believe very much that Our Revolution and other groups similar to us, when you look at Moral Mondays with the Reverend Dr. William Barber in North Carolina, it's the same thing, that there is a synergy, there is a connection that we make with one another based on what we have in common. And the overwhelming majority of the working poor and barely middle class in this country across ethnicities are suffering. So when we talk about economics, we're talking about that for everybody. But if we are conscious minded and also honest with ourselves, we do also have to say, when we talk about those issues, there is an extra burden, an extra suffering, if you will, overlaid on the African American community and other communities of color because of institutional racism. But to say that progressives are bros and that they're racist is just false. And while some could be, anybody can be racist, but a lot of this is really about understanding. Stephen Covey once said, seek first to understand and then to be understood. But I agree with you, RJ. I don't think that Dr. King, well, we know that Dr. King would not, because we have a body of his work, we have a body of his speeches. That poor people's movement that he was pushing, it wasn't just about African American poor people. He was talking about poor people in this country, period. Did he know the extra burden that's placed on African Americans because of the history of racism and bigotry in this country? Absolutely. But his mission, his ministry was really about all people. And,
Well,
and that's what we ascribe to.
Well, I love what you said so much, Nina Turner, and for a variety of reasons we won't be able to go into, but one of them is that, Bernie Sanders' primary opponent last year told a group of, I believe it was Black Lives Matter activists, I don't want to change hearts, I want to change laws. But what you said came from a place of heart, and it's my personal belief, my deeply held belief, that leaders like Dr. King and others understood that you change laws by first changing hearts. So in the 30 seconds or so we got left, any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts?
No, amen to that.
Oh,
You
amen.
got to change hearts.
All right.
I mean, you have to change hearts, because in order to change minds, you got to have people in those spaces and in those places who have heart and who have connection. So you're absolutely right. We change laws and we change minds by changing people's heart.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but as always, great to talk to you, and thanks for coming on the program. Nina Turner, president of Our Revolution, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, RJ.